Have you ever felt invisible? Like you have so much more to offer than the world gives you credit for? We've been taught to believe that power lies with the wealthy, the loud, the ones in charge. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie. The most incredible transformations often come from the quietest corners, from the people no one is paying attention to. This is a story that proves it. A story about how a powerful millionaire mocks his cleaning lady, only to have his entire fortune and fame flipped upside down by her incredible hidden secret. Imagine a man like Patrick Harrison, a ruthless millionaire living at the top of the world, convinced of his own genius, barely noticing the people who keep his world running. Now picture Isabella Calderon, a humble, diligent cleaning lady, enduring the daily pain of being looked through as if she were made of glass, feeling utterly humiliated. Their worlds were never meant to collide, but a single disastrous moment, a critical business deal, collapsing due to a catastrophic translation error, is about to bind their fates together in the most unexpected plot twist you can imagine. This isn't just a story about a business deal. This is a deeply emotional and heart-aching story about what happens when arrogance clashes with quiet dignity, when pride is forced to its knees, and when an act of profound kindness leads to an unbelievable redemption. You are about to witness the incredible moment where Isabella's simple 10-second translation not only saves Patrick's empire, but shatters his entire reality, sparking the beginning of an unlikely love story and a journey of profound change. This is the ultimate story of a surprise that changes everything. Think about this for a moment. What truly defines a person's worth? Is it the title on their business card or the car they drive? Patrick Harrison thought he knew the answer, and he was devastatingly wrong. This story forces us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves a hard question. How many times have we overlooked the quiet genius standing right beside us? How many Isabellas have we ignored in our own lives, not realizing they held the very secret or kindness we desperately needed? We want this story to travel the world, so let us know in the comments what beautiful city or country you're watching from today. Your support means everything to us, so please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story, and share this video with someone you know whose heart will be touched by this message. Well, let me tell you about Patrick Harrison. From the top of his gleaming skyscraper, the world looked like a board game he was winning, a map of his ever-expanding fortune. He was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he owned it, and everyone in it. This powerful millionaire had a presence that could make even the most confident person feel small. It's funny, isn't it? How a man can build an empire of glass and steel but have a foundation made of sheer arrogance. And then there was Isabella Calderon, the cleaning lady. To Patrick, she was just part of the background, a ghost who polished his triumphs and wiped away the dust of his conquests. He barely registered her presence, and on the rare occasions he did, it was with a dismissive glance. It was a classic case of seeing without truly seeing. He mocks her existence with his indifference, a quiet kind of cruelty that stings more than any loud insult, leaving her feeling utterly humiliated. You see, in Patrick's black and white world, you were either a player or a pawn. There was no in-between. And Isabella, with her worn-out cleaning cart and quiet demeanor, was firmly in the latter category in his eyes. He never once considered that this unassuming cleaning lady could harbor any kind of secret, let alone one that could shake his world. It's a common mistake the powerful make. They underestimate the quiet ones, the listeners. Every evening, as she emptied the trash bin beside his sprawling desk, she'd catch snippets of conversations about deals worth millions. He'd talk loudly on the phone, completely oblivious to her, as if she were a piece of furniture. This daily ritual of being ignored was a constant, painful reminder of her station. What he didn't know was that behind her tired eyes was a mind sharper than he could ever imagine, a mind that was piecing together the very puzzle of his success. It's a heartaching and sad reality for so many. People who are made to feel invisible often see the most. Isabella overheard things. She noticed details. She understood nuances that flew right over the heads of Patrick's expensive consultants. This wasn't just about cleaning, it was about survival, about observing the world that had cast her aside. A world that was about to be turned on its head by a surprise it never saw coming. And that's where our story really begins, my friend. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. A secret hiding in plain sight, in the hands of a woman had humiliated countless times. He believed his fortune was secure, built by his own genius. But a storm was brewing, and the key to weathering it didn't lie in his bank accounts, but in the silent knowledge of the woman who cleaned his floors. He was about to learn a lesson in the most emotional way possible. You have to understand, Patrick Harrison didn't just become a millionaire by being nice. He was a shark in a world of minnows, a ruthless CEO whose ambition was legendary. His days were a whirlwind of high-stakes negotiations and cold, calculated decisions that built his massive fortune. Luxury wasn't a choice for him, it was his native language. He wore bespoke suits like a second skin and saw the world through the tinted windows of a chauffeured Rolls-Royce, a gilded cage of his own making. This lifestyle created a chasm between him and, well, almost everyone else. He had this infuriating habit of dismissing people with a wave of his hand, as if they were minor inconveniences in his grand narrative. If you couldn't increase his net worth or his fame, you simply didn't exist. He mocks people not with words, but with a profound and absolute indifference. It was his signature move, and it left a trail of bruised egos and humiliated professionals in his wake. Isabella Calderon, the quiet cleaning lady, was at the very bottom of this hierarchy of noticeability. For Patrick, she was less than a ghost. She was the silence that followed a storm, the background hum of a city he owned. He would stride past her in the evenings, barking orders into his phone, never once making eye contact. Her diligence and quiet dignity were invisible to him, overshadowed by the blinding glare of his own self-importance. It's a heart-aching tragedy in its own way, isn't it? A man so surrounded by wealth that he becomes blind to the simple, human value of others. He saw Isabella not as a person, but as a function, a pair of hands that made his pristine world even more perfect. The thought that she might have a story, a past, or a secret of her own was as alien to him as the concept of failure. He was the architect of his success, and in his mind, he needed no one. The irony, oh, the delicious irony, is that the very person he considered nothing more than a part of the office furniture held the key to his future. This powerful millionaire, so adept at reading markets and predicting trends, was completely illiterate when it came to reading people. He was comfortable in his bubble, unaware that a simple, everyday interactioner, lack thereof, was about to trigger a plot twist worthy of a Hollywood movie. And so the stage was set. On one side, a titan of industry, insulated by his wealth and arrogance. On the other, a woman made invisible by his gaze, quietly navigating a life of hardship. He had no idea that his entire empire was precariously balanced, and the person he consistently humiliated was the only one who could prevent its spectacular collapse. It was a ticking time bomb of circumstance. Now let's talk about the heart of this story, Isabella Calderon. Her life was a universe away from the lavish existence of Patrick Harrison. She wasn't working for fame or a greater fortune, she worked for something far more precious: her family. Every speck of dust she wiped away, every floor she polished until it shone, was a testament to her love and dedication. She was a silent warrior, fighting her battles with a mop and a bucket, her endurance fueled by the faces of her loved ones. The daily indignity of being invisible was a heavy cloak to wear. To be in a room but not be seen, to be present but not be hearted, was a unique and soul-crushing kind of loneliness. People like Patrick looked right through her, their eyes gliding over her as if she were a transparent pane of glass. This constant feeling of being humiliated was a quiet burden she carried with grace, a secret ache she never showed. But here is the plot twist brewing beneath the surface. Beneath the humble uniform of a cleaning lady was a mind that could rival any of the so-called geniuses Patrick paraded through his office. Isabella possessed a brilliant, analytical intellect, a gift for languages and patterns that had once been her entire world. It was a secret she kept locked away, a life she had been forced to leave behind, a past that was about to erupt into the present. Think about the sheer strength that requires to have so much inside you knowledge, wisdom, experience, and to be judged solely by the uniform you wear. It's a heart-aching testament to her character. She never grew bitter or resentful. Instead, she channeled her energy into her work, performing her duties with a meticulousness that was, in itself, a form of rebellion. Her dignity was her shield against a world that tried to make her feel small. She saw the irony in it all. She, the humble cleaning lady, understood the rhythm of this corporate empire better than most. She knew who was stressed, who was confident, who was hiding something, all from the subtle cues they left behind. Her life was a masterclass in observation, a skill she had honed to perfection. She was a silent ethnography in the land of the millionaire giants, gathering data they didn't even know they were dropping. And this brilliant mind, this hidden well of knowledge, was her greatest secret. It was a treasure buried beneath layers of hardship and humility, waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. Little did anyone know, especially the arrogant Mr. Harrison, that a crisis was looming that no amount of money could solve. It was a crisis that could only be solved by a very specific, very rare kind of knowledge. The moment of reckoning arrived. On a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't a hostile takeover or a market crash that threatened Patrick's empire. It was something far more subtle. He was in the middle of the most crucial video conference of his career, a deal that would not just add to his fortune, but would cement his legacy. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension, the kind that only a multi-billion-dollar negotiation can create. It was a make-or-break moment. The investors were from a small, incredibly wealthy sovereign fund, and they spoke a rare and complex dialect. Patrick, ever the shrewd millionaire, had hired the best translation service money could buy, or so he thought. As the lead investor spoke, a calm but firm man on the screen, the translator's voice filled the room, relaying his words in English. But something was off. The tone didn't match the investor's body language. Suddenly, the friendly atmosphere chilled. The smiles on the investors' faces vanished, replaced by masks of stern disapproval. A cloud of confusion and offense descended upon the meeting. The translator, oblivious, continued to speak, but his words were now building a wall instead of a bridge. A catastrophic translation error had just occurred, turning a promising proposal into what sounded like a grave insult. The deal was collapsing in real time. Panic began to creep into Patrick's eyes. He could feel the opportunity of a lifetime slipping through his fingers like sand. Millions of dollars, years of work, and his much coveted fame were on the line, all because of a few poorly chosen words. He glared at his team, his face a thunderous mask of fury. How could this happen? How could his meticulously planned operation fail because of something as basic as translation? The translator stuttered, realizing something was wrong but not knowing what. He tried to backtrack, but it only made things worse. The investors were now speaking to each other rapidly in their native tongue, their voices sharp and agitated. The deal wasn't just on the verge of collapse, it was teetering on the edge of a cliff, about to be blown away by a gust of cultural misunderstanding. The dream was turning into a nightmare. This was the ultimate test. All of Patrick Harrison's power, all his wealth, was utterly useless in this moment. He was trapped in a communication breakdown, a helpless spectator at his own corporate funeral. What he needed wasn't more money or more influence, he needed a miracle. He needed someone who could understand what had just gone so horribly wrong. The air was thick with the stench of failure. In that vortex of panic, Patrick's mind scrambled for a target, a scapegoat for the disaster unfolding before him. His eyes, darting around the room in frantic search of a solution, landed on Isabella Calderon. She had been quietly emptying a wastebasket in the corner, as she did every day at this time. In his collapsing world, her silent, methodical presence was suddenly an unbearable irritant, a symbol of the mundane world intruding on his high-stakes failure. "Get out!" He didn't say the words, but his gesture was louder and crueler than any shout. He flicked his wrist with sharp, dismissive anger, a motion that screamed, "You don't belong here, you are a distraction." It was a raw, unfiltered projection of his own fear and frustration. He was a drowning man thrashing about, and Isabella was simply the closest object to push away. His anger had to go somewhere, and she was the easiest, safest target. For Isabella, it was a moment of profound and public humiliation. All eyes in the room, already filled with tension, snapped to her for a fleeting second. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Her mere existence was a problem. She, the cleaning lady, was a distraction to the great millionaire as his fortune crumbled. The gesture was a brutal confirmation of her invisibility, a confirmation that in his world, she was less than nothing, just an object to be moved. It was the kind of heart-aching cruelty that leaves invisible scars. She wasn't making a sound, she wasn't in anyone's way, but in his moment of crisis, Patrick needed to exert control over something, and he chose to exert it over her. It was a desperate, ugly reflex from a man who had lost his grip. He mocks her not for an action, but for her very being, and in front of his entire team, which amplified the sting. Isabella froze for a second, the plastic liner of the trash can crinkling in her hand. Her face remained impassive, a mask of practiced neutrality she had perfected over the years. But inside, a storm of emotions raged. To be dismissed so callously, so unfairly, while she was simply doing her job, was the ultimate indignity. She had endured his indifference for years, but this active, hostile dismissal was a new low. Without a word, she gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and began to turn towards the door. Her movements were slow, dignified, a stark contrast to the frantic energy radiating from Patrick. She was about to exit the room and leave him to his fate, to let him drown in the silence of his own making. But just as she reached the door, something stopped her. It was a sound, a word from the screen that she knew all too well. As Isabella's hand touched the cool metal of the doorknob, a phrase from the investors on the screen cut through the tense air. It was a single, elegant string of words in their native dialect. To everyone else in the room, it was just more unintelligible noise fueling the crisis. But to Isabella, it was as clear as a bell ringing in a silent church. Her blood ran cold. She didn't just recognize the language, she recognized the specific regional dialect, one she knew intimately. It was the language of her childhood, the language of her academic past. The disastrous translation wasn't just bad, it was a word-for-word, literal interpretation of a deeply idiomatic phrase. The translator had turned a common expression of deep consideration for a surprising offer into a declaration of disgusted disbelief at an offensive proposal. It was a rookie mistake, but one with multi-million-dollar consequences. The surprise wasn't the offer, but the sheer incompetence of the translation. This was her secret, the secret that the quiet cleaning lady held. She wasn't just a woman who mopped floors, she was a former university professor of linguistics, a specialist in this very family of languages. She understood the nuance, the culture, the very soul of the words that were about to cost Patrick Harrison his fortune. It was a staggering plot twist happening in the silence of her own mind. She could have just walked away. Lord knows, he deserved it. After the way he had just humiliated her, after years of being treated like she was invisible, Letting him fail would have been a quiet personal justice. Redemption for her own wounded pride. But that wasn't who Isabella Calderon was. Watching the train wreck, knowing she was the only person in the world who could stop it, she felt a different kind of duty rise up. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. The fate of the entire company, the jobs of everyone in that room, who had just witnessed her shame, and the fortune of the man who mocked Herod, was all balanced on a knife's edge. She could feel the seconds ticking by, each one pushing the deal further into the abyss. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat of indecision and a dawning sense of purpose. In that split second, her past and present collided. The linguistics professor and the cleaning lady became one. She knew the correct translation, the precise words that would not only fix the error but would show a level of cultural respect that would dazzle the investors. The question was, would she use it? Did she have the courage to step out of the shadows and speak up? Courage, my friend, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quietest voice in the room, the one that chooses kindness when it has every right to choose revenge. In that moment, Isabella made a choice. She turned away from the door, her heart a frantic butterfly in her chest. Her eyes darted around and found a small, pristine white napkin left over from the morning's coffee service. It was an insignificant object about to become the most important document in the company's history. With a trembling hand, she pulled a small pen from her apron pocket. Her movements were swift and sure, a stark contrast to the chaos and panic gripping the powerful men around her. She wasn't thinking about the money or the fame. She was thinking about the words, the beautiful, misunderstood words. In a few seconds of elegant, flowing script, she wrote down the correct translation, the one that would salvage everything. This was not an act of submission, it was an act of profound strength. To help the very man who had just humiliated her required a level of grace and kindness that was almost superhuman. It was a choice that defied logic and ego. It was a pure emotional impulse to fix what was broken, to bridge the gap that had been created. This simple act was the first step toward a redemption she wasn't even seeking for herself. She then moved with a silent grace that only someone used to being invisible could master. She glided past the frozen-faced executives, a phantom of purpose in a room paralyzed by fear. She approached the massive mahogany desk where Patrick sat, his head in his hands, the picture of defeat. He didn't even notice her approaching, he was too lost in his own personal hell. Without a word, without a sound, she discreetly slid the folded napkin onto the polished surface, placing it right beside his trembling hand. It was a tiny white flag of hope in a sea of despair. She didn't wait for a reaction or acknowledgement. Her job was done. She delivered the message, the secret that could save his fortune. With the same quiet efficiency she delivered her cleaning duties. And then, just as quietly, she retreated. She moved back towards the edge of the room, her heart pounding. She had thrown her pebble into the pond, and now all she could do was wait and see if the ripples would be enough to cause a tidal wave of change. The plot twist had been delivered. The fate of the millionaire now rested on a flimsy piece of paper. And whether he had the sense to look at it. Patrick felt the slight pressure of the napkin landing next to his hand. His first reaction was a surge of raw annoyance. What now? In the midst of his empire's collapse, was the cleaning lady really bothering him with a piece of trash? His instinct was to lash out, to sweep the offending object off his desk and into the oblivion where he felt she belonged. He was humiliated, his fortune evaporating, and this was an interruption he simply couldn't fathom. He lifted his head, his eyes burning with a frustrated rage, ready to glare at her, to finally give her the verbal dismissal he had gestured earlier. But Isabella was already gone, melting back into the shadows of the room. All that was left was the small folded napkin, an absurdly trivial object in a room defined by overwhelming crisis. He reached for it, his fingers curling with the intent to crumple it and toss it away. But then, something stopped him. Call it a gut feeling, a flicker of instinct, or just the sheer desperation of a man with no other options. For the first time in his life, his arrogance was failing him. His experts were useless, his money was worthless, his power was gone. What else was there to lose? This tiny, unexpected intervention felt different. It was a surprise, a variable he hadn't accounted for in a day of catastrophic certainties. That pause was everything. The world seemed to slow down as his fingers, which were about to crush the note, instead gently unfolded it. He was still annoyed, but his anger was now tinged with a sliver of curiosity. Who was she, the cleaning lady, to dare to interfere? What could she possibly have to say that could matter in this moment? He mocks the very idea in his own mind, even as he brings the napkin closer to his face. The writing on it was not what he expected. It was not a scrawl, it was elegant, confident cursive, the handwriting of an academic. The words were clear, concise, and in perfect English. It wasn't an apology or an excuse. It was a translation. A completely different translation from the one that had just destroyed his deal. A phrase so simple, yet so profoundly different in its meaning. It radiated a quiet authority. His mind reeled. The sheer audacity of it. The cleaning lady was correcting his high-paid professional translator. It was ludicrous. It was insane. And yet the words on the napkin felt right. They resonated with a logic and a sense of cultural understanding that the official translation had utterly lacked. A tiny seed of hope, a wild, improbable chance, began to sprout in the barren wasteland of his despair. This was it, the point of no return. Patrick Harrison, the self-made millionaire, the titan of industry, held his entire fortune in his hand, and it was written on a napkin by his cleaning lady. Logic, reason, and every ounce of his pride screamed at him to ignore it, to not make himself look like an even bigger fool. But looking at the stony faces of the investors on the screen, he knew he had nothing left. He was already a fool. This was the ultimate gamble. Taking a deep, shuddering breath that did little to calm his racing heart, he made a decision. It wasn't a calculated business move, it was a leap of faith into the absurd. In a moment of pure, unadulterated desperation, he chose to trust the ghost who haunted his office. He chose to trust Isabella Calderon. The potential for further humiliation was immense, but the possibility of redemption, however slim, was too powerful to ignore. He leaned forward towards the microphone, his own team, staring at him in stunned disbelief. What was he doing? Was he going to apologize and formally kill the deal? He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. He looked down at the napkin one last time, memorizing the elegant script, the secret message of hope. This was either the end of his fame or the beginning of a legend, and then he spoke. Ignoring his own translator, he addressed the foreign investors directly. He repeated Isabella's translation, word for word. His pronunciation was clumsy, Americanized. But the words themselves, the ones from the napkin, flowed into the microphone. A collective gasp went through the room. His own staff looked at him as if he had lost his mind. He was betting his entire empire on a secret whispered from the margins. The words hung in the air for an eternity, traveling across oceans and continents, to the ears of the men who held his fate in their hands. For a second, there was only silence. A deep, profound silence that was more terrifying than their anger. Patrick felt a cold sweat trickle down his back. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his life? Had he trusted a fantasy, a cruel plot twist in his personal tragedy? He had put his faith in the most unlikely person in his entire world. The woman he mocked, the woman he had just publicly shamed. It was an act so contrary to his entire character that it felt like an out-of-body experience. He had relinquished control, handing it over to an anonymous cleaning lady. He closed his eyes, bracing for the final fatal blow to his fortune and his pride. Then the miracle happened. The lead investor's stern face, which had been a mask of stone, suddenly broke. It wasn't a small, polite smile. It was a wide, genuine grin that reached his eyes. He let out a soft chuckle and said something to his colleague, who also began to smile. It was like the sun breaking through a storm cloud. The oppressive, suffocating tension in the boardroom evaporated in an instant, replaced by a palpable sense of relief. The change was so sudden, so complete, that it felt like a magic trick. The investors on the screen visibly relaxed, their body language shifting from hostile and closed off to open and friendly. The lead investor leaned forward, this time with warmth, and spoke again. Patrick's own translator, looking utterly baffled, relayed the new message. Mr. Harrison, our apologies for the misunderstanding. Your thoughtful clarification shows a deep respect for our ways. We are now very eager to proceed. Patrick's jaw went slack. It worked. The napkin worked. Those few words, written in a 10-second burst of courage by Isabella, had done what his millions of dollars and team of experts could not. They had not just salvaged the deal, they had made it stronger. Her translation hadn't just been correct, it had been perfect, imbued with a cultural kindness that resonated deeply with the investors. He had just witnessed a masterstroke of diplomacy from the most unexpected source. It was a plot twist of epic proportions. The cleaning lady had just saved his fortune. The woman he saw as nothing, a distraction, had possessed the secret key. All along. The sheer mind-bending surprise of it all left Patrick speechless. He wasn't a ruthless CEO in that moment. He was just a man in awe, trying to process the scale of the miracle he had just witnessed. It was a deeply emotional and humbling experience. The rest of the meeting was a blur. The deal was back on track, moving forward with a newfound warmth and enthusiasm. But Patrick's mind wasn't on the numbers or the contracts. His focus was entirely elsewhere. His entire perception of the world, of value, of people, had been shattered and was now being reassembled in a completely new way. The fame and money he was about to secure suddenly felt secondary. The deal was saved. The millions were safe. But the real story, the heart-aching story, was not about the money. It was about the quiet woman standing by the wall, the woman who had been ready to walk away. Her 10-second translation had done more than flip his fortune. It had just flipped his entire world upside down. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. As his team erupted in muted celebrations and relieved whispers, Patrick Harrison remained frozen, stunned into a profound silence. The noise of the room faded into a dull roar in his ears. He slowly turned his head, his eyes scanning the periphery. Until they found her. Isabella Calderon was standing quietly by the far wall, looking as if she was trying to merge with the wallpaper, her hands clasped in front of her. And for the very first time, he truly saw her. It was a moment of shocking clarity, like a lifetime of blurry vision suddenly snapping into perfect focus. He wasn't looking at a uniform or a function. He was looking at a person. He saw the intelligence in her watchful eyes, the quiet strength. In her posture, the aura of dignity that clung to her despite her humble clothes. He wasn't looking at a cleaning lady, he was looking at a savant, a hidden genius. The thought was staggering. How many times had he walked past her? How many times had his gaze slid over her without registering a single detail? The arrogance of it, the sheer blind arrogance, hit him like a physical blow. He felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. The woman he had dismissed and humiliated was not just his superior in that moment, she was his savior. This quiet, unassuming woman held a power he couldn't buy. He stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. He walked past his bewildered vice presidents and high-paid consultants, his eyes locked on Isabella. The room fell silent again, watching this bizarre new development. The powerful millionaire, who commanded legions and built empires, was now approaching the lowest-ranking person in the building with an expression of complete and utter awe. The surprise on his team's faces was comical. He stopped a few feet from her, his mind struggling to form a coherent thought. "You," he started, his voice raspy, barely a whisper. All his usual bravado, his booming CEO voice, was gone. He was stripped bare, vulnerable. He held up the napkin, the sacred text of his salvation, as if it were a holy relic. The question was simple, yet it held the weight of his entire worldview being shattered. "How?" he finally managed to ask, his voice thick with a mix of confusion, gratitude, and shame. "How did you know that? No one knew that." My own expert translator had no idea. It wasn't an accusation, it was a plea. A plea for understanding, a plea to make sense of the impossible plot twist that had just unfolded. He was asking for her secret, the secret she had kept hidden right under his nose. Isabella met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't look away. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, heart-aching sadness, a weariness that spoke of a long and difficult journey. She looked down at her own hands, calloused from work, and then back at the powerful millionaire standing before her, looking utterly lost. She decided in that moment that the time for secrets was over. "In my home country," she began, her voice soft but clear, resonating with a quiet dignity in the silent room. "Before I came here, my life was very different." Each word seemed to carry the weight of a memory, a piece of a life he could never have imagined for her. She wasn't just the cleaning lady anymore. She was a woman with a past, a story that was about to unfold and change everything. "I was not always a cleaning lady," she continued, a faint, bittersweet smile touching her lips. "I was a professor, a university professor of linguistics and cultural studies." The confession landed in the room with the force of a bomb. You could practically hear the collective gasp from Patrick's team. The woman they ignored, the woman their boss had just shamed, was an academic, a scholar. It was the ultimate surprise. She explained that her specialty was, of all things, the history and evolution of idiomatic expressions in that specific family of dialects. The phrase the investors had used was one she had written entire papers on. It wasn't just knowledge for her, it was her life's work, a passion she had been forced to abandon when circumstances compelled her to flee her homeland and start over with nothing. A story of fortune lost, not gained. The revelation was a deeply emotional moment. It recontextualized everything. Her quietness wasn't a lack of intelligence, it was the contemplative nature of a scholar. Her meticulous work wasn't just a job, it was the ingrained discipline of a professor. She had been hiding in plain sight, a fallen queen in a kingdom of corporate drones, her brilliance masked by a janitor's uniform. It was the most incredible secret he had ever encountered. Patrick just stared, his mind struggling to connect the two images: the woman who scrubbed at his floors and the esteemed professor she was describing. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. She had been forced to trade a life of intellectual pursuit and respect for one of invisibility and manual labor, all while possessing a gift that he had just seen was priceless. His previous actions didn't just seem arrogant, now they seemed monstrous. A wave of shame so profound it was almost sickening washed over Patrick Harrison. It was a physical sensation, a cold dread that settled in the pit of his stomach. Every dismissive glance, every impatient sigh, every moment he had looked through her flashed in his mind. He had mocked a scholar. He had humiliated a woman of immense intellect and dignity. He saw his own reflection in the story she told, and the image was ugly and small. He, the great millionaire, had been so blinded by his own perceived importance that he had failed to see the treasure right in front of him. His arrogance had not only been unkind, it had been stupid. He almost lost the biggest deal of his life because he was too proud to see the humanity in the woman who cleaned his office. This realization was a far more powerful blow than any financial loss could ever be. "Stay," he blurted out, the word raw with desperation. "Please, don't go." The investors were still on the screen, waiting. The deal was saved, but it wasn't closed. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he couldn't do it without her. His team of experts was useless. He needed her mind, her knowledge, her secret weapon. He needed Isabella Calderon. He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "To a plea, he'll pay you. Anything you want. Name your price. A consultant's fee, a bonus. I don't care what it costs. My fortune is on the line, but this is more than that now." It was a classic Patrick Harrison movetry to solve a problem with money. But even as he said the words, they felt hollow and inadequate. How could you put a price on dignity and salvation? This was the beginning of his redemption, though he didn't know it yet. It started with this single, desperate act of acknowledging his own inadequacy. He was admitting he needed help, and not from one of his powerful friends or expensive hires, but from the cleaning lady. The power dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. The man who owned the world was now begging for help from a woman who had, until 10 minutes ago, owned nothing in his eyes. He looked at her, his expression a mixture of shame, hope, and raw panic. "Please, Isabella," he said, using her name with a respect that was entirely new. "Help me. Help me close this deal. I can't do it without you." The fate of his company, his fame, and perhaps even his soul, now depended entirely on her answer. He was completely at her mercy. Isabella looked at the desperate millionaire before her, a man offering her a fortune to do what she once did for the simple love of knowledge. A flicker of an old fire ignited in her eyes, the fire of a professor in her element. She considered his offer, the money, the chance for a different life. But then she looked past him, at the faces of the investors on the screen, who were watching this strange, silent drama unfold with curiosity. "I will help you, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice steady and calm, "but not for money." The statement hung in the air, a quiet defiance that was more powerful than any negotiation tactic. "I will help because this is my field of expertise. I will help because it is the right thing to do." In that moment, she was no longer the cleaning lady, she was the most powerful person in the room, operating on a level of integrity Patrick had rarely encountered. A new kind of surprise rippled through the boardroom. This was not the reaction of someone who had been living on the margins. This was the reaction of someone with an unshakable moral core. Her refusal of his money was not a rejection of him, but an affirmation of herself. It was an act of profound kindness and dignity, and it commanded a new and immediate respect from everyone watching, especially Patrick. He had never felt so small. She stepped forward, moving towards the conference table, not as a servant, but as a consultant taking her rightful place. She pulled up a chair, and the men who had ignored her for years now shuffled to make room, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. She wasn't asking for respect, her quiet confidence and profound knowledge demanded it. It was the ultimate, unspoken status reversal. For the next hour, Isabella Calderon was magnificent. She guided Patrick through the rest of the negotiation with a quiet, confident authority. She would listen intently to the investors, then provide Patrick with a perfect, nuanced translation and a brief cultural explanation. She didn't just translate words, she translated meaning, intent, and respect. It was a masterclass in communication, a beautiful intellectual dance. Patrick watched her, mesmerized. He simply did as she instructed, a willing student to her masterful teaching. He was witnessing a form of genius he had never understood before, not the loud, aggressive genius of the boardroom, but the deep, wise, and heart-aching genius of a true intellectual. She was saving his fortune, and she was doing it with a grace and kindness he knew he didn't deserve. As the meeting concluded, with the deal signed and the investors beaming, Patrick felt a strange sense of emptiness. He had won. He was richer, his fame more secure than ever. But all he could think about was the woman sitting beside him. He found himself studying her, the way she held her head, the thoughtful look in her eyes, the quiet calm that enveloped her. He was utterly captivated, and it had very little to do with the fortune she had just saved. It was her kindness that struck him the most. She had every reason in the world to let him fail, to walk away and leave him to the consequences of his own arrogance. He had humiliated her. He had treated her as less than human. Yet she had chosen compassion. She had chosen to help, not for personal gain, but out of a profound sense of integrity. It was a quality as rare and as valuable as the dialect she spoke. In his world of ruthless deals and transactional relationships, everything had a price. Loyalty could be bought, alliances were temporary, and kindness was often seen as a weakness to be exploited. He suddenly saw his wealthy world for what it was, a glittering but emotionally barren landscape. Isabella was a splash of vibrant, living color in his monochrome existence. This was a plot twist he never anticipated for his own life. He realized he was feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time: genuine admiration. It was a feeling that went beyond respect for his skill. He was admiring her character, her very soul. This emotional connection was foreign territory for the stoic millionaire, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. He felt a pull towards her that was more powerful than any business deal he had ever chased. This was the beginning of a different kind of story, one that wasn't about balance sheets or stock prices. It was a heart-aching narrative beginning to unfold between two people from impossibly different worlds, brought together by a crisis. He was a man who had everything but lacked the things that mattered. She was a woman who had lost everything but held on to the qualities that made her truly rich. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that letting her walk out of his life was not an option. This wasn't about gratitude anymore. It was about a deep, undeniable need to be near her, to learn from her, to perhaps, just perhaps, become a man worthy of the kindness she had shown him. The seeds of an unexpected love story were being sown in the ashes of his pride. That evening, Patrick insisted on a celebration dinner. It wasn't the usual raucous affair with champagne and loud congratulations. It was a more intimate gathering with his core team at the city's most exclusive restaurant. And seated at the head of the table, next to him, was Isabella Calderon. She wore a simple but elegant dress Patrick had his assistant purchase for her that afternoon, and she looked uncomfortable but radiant, a quiet star in a constellation of power suits. The mood was strange, a mixture of awe and lingering embarrassment from his executives. They kept stealing glances at Isabella, this woman who had been a ghost just that morning and was now the guest of honor. They treated her with a reverence born from witnessing a miracle. The cleaning lady was gone. In her place sat a queen, her quiet dignity her crown. The air was thick with the unsaid, the apology for years of blindness. Then Patrick stood up, glass in hand. The room fell silent. Everyone expected a toast to the deal, to the money, to their collective success. But Patrick didn't look at his team. He looked at Isabella. His voice, when he spoke, was clear, steady, and filled with an emotional sincerity that no one in that room had ever heard from him before. This was not the ruthless CEO. This was a man transformed. "We're here tonight to celebrate a victory," he began. "But the victory isn't the deal. The victory is what we learned today." He paused, letting the words sink in. "For years, I believed my company's greatest asset was its capital, its market position, its aggressive strategy. I was wrong." He raised his glass higher, his eyes locked on Isabella's. "Our greatest asset is Isabella Calderon." The shock in the room was electric. He continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She didn't just save a deal today. She did more than save my fortune and my fame. She saved me from my own arrogance. She showed me what true integrity and kindness look like. It was a public confession, an act of redemption played out before his inner circle. He was tearing down his old self to build a new one. So I'm not toasting a deal, he concluded, his gaze never leaving her. In toasting the start of a new chapter. A toast to Isabella, the woman who saved this company. And my soul. It was the ultimate status reversal, a public declaration that shifted the very foundations of their world. As they clinked glasses, it was clear this wasn't an ending. It was the heart-aching, improbable beginning of a redemption and a love story no one saw coming. What an incredible journey of redemption and surprise, wasn't it? We witnessed how a moment of crisis can strip away everything we think is important: fortune, fame, and power, revealing what truly matters. We saw a powerful millionaire, Patrick Harrison, brought to his knees, not by a competitor, but by his own arrogance, only to be lifted up by the profound kindness and secret brilliance of Isabella Calderon, the very cleaning lady he mocks and humiliated. Their story is a powerful, heart-aching reminder that everyone has a story, and there is often a hidden fortune of knowledge and dignity behind the faces we see every day, but never truly look at. The ultimate plot twist wasn't just that a 10-second translation saved an empire, it was that it opened a heart, sparking a beautiful and unexpected love story. It's a testament to the fact that true value isn't measured in dollars, but in character. So what did you think? We'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to like this video, as it helps our stories reach more people. More importantly, share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this emotional story impacted you the most? Did you expect this ending? Or were you hoping for a different outcome for Patrick and Isabella? Your perspective is what makes this community so special. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We have a library full of older stories just waiting for you, each one designed to touch your heart and make you think. Thank you for being here, for watching, and for being a part of our journey. We'll see you in the next one.